All right, so let's talk about this first story. And this is a story about an article that was written by a man named Gilbert Levin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this was an opinion piece that he did. And the title of it is, I'm convinced we found evidence of life on Mars in the 1970s.
Right.
Now, Gilbert Levin is an engineer and an inventor, and he was the principal investigator on this project called Labeled Release Experiment. And that was during like the Viking missions to Mars back in the 70s.
Oh, absolutely.
And as part of that experiment, there was a life detection experiment. That was part of this labeled release project that they were doing. And during that mission, when they did their tests, the initial results that they got from Mars were positive.
Right.
And he says that as the experiment progressed, and this is back in 1976, as the experiment progressed, they had a total of 4 positive results, and it was supported by all these different varied controls. And you're talking about 2 Viking spacecrafts that were stationed like 4,000 miles apart. And they were getting all these tests and getting these positive results. And it turns out that the results that they were getting were similar to those that were produced by the same sort of tests that you would get on Earth.
Right.
So in his opinion, what they were finding was signs and evidence of life on Mars.
So why was that not reported?
Well, however, NASA concluded that the labeled release had found a substance that was mimicking life, but it was not actually life. So they disagreed with his analysis of what he was finding, these results that he was getting from these specific tests. So he wanted to continue to do these tests, and advance the science and stuff. But he said inexplicably, over the next 43 years since the Viking, none of NASA's Mars landers have carried any kind of life detection instrument.
Right.
Nobody's followed up on his results that he got back in the 70s. They disagreed with what he said. They thought that he just found something that was sort of mimicking life, and then they just didn't explore it anymore.
Right.
They put that to rest. And so this whole article, it's really interesting. It goes very in detail with everything he found and all of the subsequent discoveries we've made through the years with Mars, and how that just supports in more what he found back in the 70s.
As a small child, when that was going on and stuff, there was a lot of things. You had shows like In Search Of, we've talked about before, and you didn't have a whole lot out there, right? I mean, at most you would have that, and you would have like some kind of show on the Fantastic or whatever. And I remember seeing The Face on Mars.
Right.
And that really, it didn't frighten me, but it intrigued me so much. That was the first thing that made me want to be an astronaut, was The Face on Mars.
Right.
I wanted to go find life in space. And of course, Star Wars helped. I wanted to battle people in space. Of course. But I remember, I always talking about the movies. Everything was creepier in the 70s. Everything was scarier in the 70s. Everything was it was like the last era of wonder. And where you were like, it seemed like everybody was on the same page as far as, let's find this, let's it's still mysteries and all this. And of course I don't have a lot of memory of it, but
right.
The whole thing, the point I'm making is, I truly believe there's a lot of people out there that say, I was part of the secret space mission. I've been part of the secret space force. I've been blah 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 blah, And we've talked about that before. We've talked about how it sounds ludicrous, as do some stories that have happened to us personally. Okay, so I kind of look at it objectively, as we always do. Rule number 1 with us is we don't shame people. We don't make fun of people. We listen, at least.
Right.
And listening to that, you have people that are lawyers, people that, are not by nature nutty people. Right. And then you have things that have happened, like when it looked like there was a shadow of somebody fixing the rover a couple years ago. And I mean, it was just something that was there, but what ruins that is that comes out, and then the 10,000 pictures of a rock where people are matrixing.
Right, and they're like drawing pictures on it and saying, look, it's a chimp riding a motorcycle.
Exactly. Thank you for getting in my mind.
Right.
But so what's wrong with this article? I'm the one being serious, and you're the chimp on a motorcycle.
I think there was really an article.
Oh,
chimp on a motorcycle.
Stop it. Wouldn't it be funny if it really was chimps on motorcycles?
Right. We'd be the ones going, oh.
No, I would be the one that was going to Elon and being like, okay, look.
I need to go to Mars.
I got to go now. It's a planet of monkeys that ride motorcycles.
Right.
I hope they dress as Evel Knievel. Oh, my God.
Why wouldn't they?
Wouldn't it be awesome? Anyway, the whatever is there, I believe it's more than microbial. I believe personally that not only did we have an incredible presence there at one time as human beings, I believe that the evidence is overwhelming that there are pyramids, that there are structures, ruins. I will say ruins, but I do believe that underground there is every bit of a culture of I believe that they probably went underground. If you look at evidence that mimics here on Earth, things that we do here on Earth, and that's really, it's not anything I've watched, but just using my own mind.
Right.
I think, well, what did we do before this group of men were here? Okay. And we talked about this before, and so the listeners are already educated on this. For those first-time listeners, if I've got some pop star in LA listening or something, I gotta put stuff like it. Hi, Demi Lovato. I gotta put this stuff out there.
Right.
You never know. And say that we believe that there was a time before the last cataclysm. And you can go watch some wonderful, like Graham Hancock, you can go out there, look that stuff up. And really, his thing is really what happened before the cataclysm of like 12,000 years ago or whatever.
Right.
And really, I think some of the theories are, like the Great Pyramid, right, was already there.
Right.
The Sphinx was already there. And,
right.
They've added to stuff. And it's funny because if you go, Bright Insight is a great thing on YouTube to go look at and watch. Mystery History is another one to go watch. It's got some really good stuff. And it kind of shows you how not only does everything around the entire world sort of, there's similarities on your pyramids. There's similarities on a lot of the building and a lot of the techniques where people say, well, there's no way we can do that even today. And they'll have these certain little like rivets that are the same everywhere. Really, the prevailing theory is that, we kind of moved into some of these things after the cataclysm or whatever, kind of a new age of man. And if you look at the architecture, the interesting thing with Egypt, as the years have progressed, the pyramids that are newer have gotten worse.
Right.
The architecture is similar and interesting and great.
Right.
But not better.
Right.
So how do you explain?
Yeah, I remember we watched some videos where they would show you that what the older stuff was very precise and well done, and obviously that's why it was still there.
Machine
and then
cut.
Whatever was built on top of it was trying to mimic that, but it was like a kid had done it. It was just
exactly
not as good.
Right. You could see the chips and stuff like that. And really that's one of the strangest things. If you just think about that, think about right now, we build a building. Okay. So in 100 years from now, are we going to build that building better, or are we going to go back to logs?
Right.
And we know the answer. It's just a rhetorical question, but there's so much more than just that. So when I look at Mars, I see things that look like pyramids, which makes sense if you're looking at a time when we could either travel between both planets, or we left one planet to come to the other planet. Right. For whatever reason, because of a cataclysm there. There's proof that happened. Right. There's an asteroid belt there that looks like maybe something blew up. So maybe something came through. That's all conjecture. We don't really know. But I'm just saying, going on evidence to evidence, what things look like. We know there was water there. We know there was a story last week about a utopia. And so the more we do it, it's almost weekly, there's a Mars story. Right. And now there's all this interest to go to Mars, right? There's all this interest. We're going to do this. We're going to go here. We're going to do that. Well, I think about things that have come out over the years, and you know, which are very strange. And I was talking about the people that said they were part of a space team or something. Mm-hmm. I like the story from the UK.
Okay.
There was a British hacker, and he's not really a hacker. He hacked, but he bought a book on hacking that had to be banned because it was so good.
Right. Obviously.
Yeah. So this is also back in like 2000. It was like 2001. Gary McKinnon, the British hacker,
I recognize that name.
who not only did he do something, he was kind of showing how easy it is to get into, you know, the back doors of the government and stuff.
Right.
He was, the way he put it, there was rudimentary security.
Right.
There was nothing. Like anybody from all over the world probably was in our stuff, you know?
Right.
And so he goes in because he had read a book called The Disclosure Project. And The Disclosure Project talked about, well, actually, in his words, looking it up here, a Wired magazine back before his sentencing. And the thing is about him, they went bananas to get him. Like they wanted him extradited. They wanted him. They went after him harder than Bin Laden.
Yeah.
And it was just a huge deal. And he's like, look, he's never been in trouble.
Right.
Never done anything, you know, and instead they're looking at life in prison and all this stuff, right? You know, back at the time. So anyway, he did an interview right before all that with Wired magazine. And they're like, well, what sort of evidence, you know? And he goes, well, a NASA photographic expert said that there was a Building 8 at Johnson Space Center where they regularly airbrushed out images of UFOs from the high-resolution satellite imaging. Now, we've talked about that. We've heard about that. We've seen people testimony that on videos and stuff that, hey, I worked there for a short time, and my job was airbrushing this, right?
Right.
So I logged on to NASA and was able to access this department. So he knew where he was going, which helps.
Right.
They had huge, high-resolution images stored in their picture files. They had filtered and unfiltered or processed and unprocessed files. My dial-up 56K connection, again, 2001, was very slow trying to download one of these picture files. As this was happening, I had remote control of their desktop, and by adjusting it to 4-bit color and low screen resolution, I was able to briefly see one of these pictures. It was silvery cigar-shaped object with geodesic spheres on either side. There were no visible seams or riveting. There was no reference to the size of the object, and the picture was taken presumably by a satellite looking down on it. The object didn't look man-made or anything like what we have created. Because I was using a Java application, I could only get a screenshot of the picture. It did not go into my temporary internet files. At my crowning moment, someone at NASA discovered what I was doing, and I was disconnected. I also got access to Excel spreadsheets. One was titled Non-Terrestrial Officers. It contained names and ranks of United States Air Force personnel who are not registered anywhere else. It also contained information about ship-to-ship transfers, but I never seen the names of these ships noted anywhere else. And it's, you know, it goes on about other stuff and everything, but they made such a big deal. Now, on the surface, somebody could say, skeptic, could say, well, I mean, obviously he's making that up. He's somebody who was obviously interested in UFOs. And well, yeah, he was. And that's why he went and looked there. But if he was making any of this up, would they freaking come after him with an iron fist across the pond? I mean, everything they did to get this guy, okay, off 30 seconds of being in there when he's not doing anything. I mean, he's not like trying to bring anything down, upload a virus, anything like that. Never been in trouble. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So obviously what he's saying is true. And if you put that in there and you got the non-terrestrial officers and the ship-to-ship, it all makes sense. You know, that stuff makes sense. I'm just thinking that a lot of these stories we're given are fluff, and they're getting you prepared, they're getting you ready, that we have been doing all this for a very long time. And what's really mind-blowing is how long that could be.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, well, I read this story recently, speaking of Mars, that was really interesting. 'Cause, you know, I'm really interested in, you know, reincarnation with kids and things like that. And so I read the story, and I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's about that that Russian kid that was just a genius. His name was Boris Kiprianovich.
Right.
And
I remember the story.
Yeah, and he was just born like in 1996. This is fairly recent, but he was just blew everybody's minds because when he was born, he was already just a super genius. Like he was talking when he was 18 months old. At 2 years old, he was, in kindergarten, he painting, drawing, talking, full sentences, just way beyond where a child should be.
Right.
And when you read the story, it's really interesting because it talks about when he was 7 years old, how he told his parents and just a bunch of adults that were around him that he was reincarnated and he used to live on Mars. And he had this unbelievable knowledge of like the space and planets and things that he had never been taught or read or anything like that. Like he would talk to teachers and just blow their minds with the knowledge that he had, the very specific things he could tell you about things that were in space.
Right.
And he was telling them, when he was 7, he did this big long story and he was talking about how in his past life, he was a Martian. He was part of a race. He was very tall and thin, and they traveled around. They had great technology. And I apologize, I didn't bring the story. I don't remember every single thing he said, but he did say that eventually they destroyed their world with nuclear war.
Wow.
That was what happened, and that most of the civilization, perished, that some did survive, and a lot of them were reincarnated on different planets, and some of them were here on Earth. And he called them indigo children, which I know you've heard that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those are the smarter children that, are born. And some of the more interesting things he said, though, he talked about how when in his past life, when he was a Martian, that he would visit Earth. And this was way back. He said he visited the Egyptians, when they were in their heyday. And he talked about how the Sphinx holds all kinds of knowledge and that when it's opened, it will change the world.
Yeah.
And he mentioned something about there being a mechanism to open it behind the ear, but he didn't really remember. He just kind of remembered it was somewhere near the ear and that there was a lot of stuff in there. There was something in there and something about the pyramids too, I think. But he also talked about how they traveled and, a lot of different things and how that they thought that the Earth was on this same kind of path that Mars was on at one time, before they destroyed themselves, and how he doesn't want that to happen anymore. The indigo children, they don't want that to be our fate because that's already happened. And one of the things he mentioned was that some of the Martians that survived this terrible nuclear war still live there underground.
Wow.
And that, he doesn't know if maybe they're almost extinct or if they're still there, but some of them did retreat into the planet.
Yeah.
And just to think that he was 7 years old talking about this, and you can go on YouTube and there are interviews with him when he was like 11. And some of the things I've not watched one, but they say that the way he talks about all these things, just very confident, very detailed, not like someone that would be making it up.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's just a child. Now, I believe I read in this article, he is now in his early 20s. He should be in his early 20s now, 1996.
Yeah.
And he has kind of retreated from society. Nobody can really find him. I know journalists have tried to find him, tried to interview him. Him and his mom sort of retreated. And I believe the last thing that they found out was that he's fine, that he's on some kind of, I don't know, campus, or he's somewhere and it has something to do with the Russian government are keeping him, away from society.
Right.
So I don't know what that's all about. It's a very interesting article, though. If you read everything he said,
right,
it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's really, and going back to things on Mars that, when I see something here that's done or could be done, why wouldn't it be done there? It's like the underground city they found in Turkey. Okay. I know that if anybody has ever watched an episode of Ancient Aliens, there's a good chance that you've seen the underground city in Turkey. And what they found there was an ancient multi-level underground city, and it could actually hold 20,000 people. And it went to a depth of about 200 feet and seriously sheltered 20,000 6,000 people.
Wow.
And their livestock and food stores. And it was the largest excavated underground city in Turkey, but it's one of several underground complexes found throughout the world. And the crazy thing when they go to it, you know, they normally, and I'm just going to say it as it is, they normally lie about how old things are.
Right.
But they still say 8th century BCE. So, I mean, good Lord, you know, you're already saying that it's BC, right?
Right.
That's their easy way to get around stuff. But you look at some of the other complexes we found that look like it's kind of telling us history. Göbekli Tepe we talk about, and they found other ones of those now. And I think we're to that point. And of course, they always try to cover the stuff up. It should be on the nightly news.
Right.
Instead of having something political and making everybody hate each other. The first thing I would put on the nightly news would be, oh, hey, by the way, we found this stuff that predates us making tools. And,
Right.
And, you know, it's got pictures of plants we've never seen, or, you know, it's almost like it's a wheel telling us things. And, you know, and the thing with the Sphinx, you know, we know the depths that the Egyptian government's Mazawi has went to, you know, when he was in charge of everything,
Right.
to hide things and to
Right. And we know from that one video we saw that they obviously excavate things before they let people know that they're excavating. Like they do it first, and then they're like, oh, hey, once they figured out what it is.
Because they were redoing it.
Look what we found.
And found a whole nother level and then closed it off to the public. And well, we've not heard anything. It's been months.
Yep.
The Sphinx, you know, they found the water damage on the side, and it's obviously water damage. Well, it's a desert. I mean, they don't have water damage there, so that obviously dates it to a different time. And Dr. Robert Schoch's done extensive work on this. And, you know, there again, he's scoffed at by a lot of scholars and stuff, probably one of the smartest people on our planet. I would really encourage you to go buy some books by him. I've got them on my bookshelf. But the thing is, he and his research and other people that are really pioneers as far as I'm concerned, they've went in there, and it's really interesting because there has been things open on the Sphinx, and they know there's little doors and stuff. I know they've went through that thing. God knows what they know, what's been hidden.
I'm curious if there's stuff that's hidden even from what they think is hidden.
Oh, I'm sure there is. I think that, like I've said before, we should take the world's biggest earth movers and just plow everything down. I mean, just knock the pyramid down. I'm being serious. Open the damn thing up. Let's see what's inside. I mean, if there is something in there imagine there being something, being knowledge. And Reagan said it best. President Reagan was talking in code or whatever back in the day. And he said, you know, imagine how the world would be, paraphrasing obviously,
Right.
if we faced a threat from outside of our planet. Would we fight amongst each other, basically, you know, or would we work together if we faced this? It was a strange speech.
It was.
And
I agree.
I remember the speech, and I remember how wondrous it was, but it was one of those kind of like, okay, all right. But imagine especially in today's society, what if there was something in there that would make us instantly all be like, oh, you know, we should probably be singing Kumbaya and holding hands, working together. Let's excel everything we have to get where we need to get to stop this madness of trying to have the bigger bombs pointed at each other. What does that accomplish? I'm not trying to be political, but come on, people. It accomplishes nothing. I know that in theory, if we have a bigger bomb, they're not going to shoot theirs at us. But that's all well and good till some moron, just some crazy person, which there are crazy people if you listen to our Halloween thing, you know. I think that we need to be focused on thinking about things like Mars, thinking about really letting them know, you know, or the government, if you're listening, hey, I know you are. Be a great time for you guys just to say, you know, all right, look, here's what we know, whether you're ready for it or not. We think you need to know this. Sorry for all the things that have happened. Sorry for the abductions. I mean, if it took a petition, you know, like, okay, we're not going to hold you legally liable. Okay. You're not going to be held in liable for any of the stuff that's happened, even though it's bad and you should have told us. Here's 1 million signatures. Okay. We're not going to hold you for this. We just want to know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody does. So tell us the truth.
Right.
It seems to me that we absolutely have beings on Mars. And I do believe they're underground.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe Mars is not the only one.
Right.
The others would be moons,
mm-hmm.
that there is life. I believe that something is wrong with our moon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that it's natural.
Right.
I believe that there's something more to it, at least, and ruins and things like that. Because if you were a Martian and you came to Earth, you went to the moon or whatever. I mean,
right.
And even the Black Knight satellite, it's been up there since we've been looking at the sky,
mm-hmm.
and it just goes around the Earth, man.
Mm-hmm.
Just goes around the Earth, and it's not ours.
Nope.
And it was kind of like common knowledge, like they know it's there,
right?
But why would they?
I guess if they don't acknowledge it, it doesn't exist.
Right. I know, I know. But it's a really interesting topic.
Mm-hmm. It is.
I'm Stacy and I are both as fired up as each other on this stuff, because over the years of my God, over a decade of research into this kind of stuff, and we've looked at the fact of this is the conclusions. This is,
mm-hmm.
when you look at story after story after story, you sort of build theories and conclusions on
mm-hmm.
stuff, but go ahead.
Well, back to this particular story I was talking about, it's the article that he wrote was really interesting. And another thing that I thought was interesting is that NASA came out with their own article and interview where they publicly denied that they found life in the 70s. Like, they felt compelled enough after this, he wrote this opinion piece to say, look, we are looking for life in the universe, but we don't believe that it was found in the 70s, despite what some people might say, basically that kind of thing.
Wow.
And to me, that's almost like protesting too much,
Absolutely. They normally don't do that.
No, normally they don't. And Gilbert Levin even said in his article that, the newest Mars lander, the one that's going up next year, it doesn't have life detection equipment. Now, they're going to be drilling in and bringing samples back, and, the European Space Agency is going to do some kind of drilling and like on-site remote testing or something, but they don't specifically have life detection equipment. So they're still, to this day, not following up on any of those results that he got back in the 70s, which I think is incredibly odd. I mean, if they say that they're looking for some type of life, you would think that would warrant further investigation with newer technology. I mean, think of all the newer technology that we have now where those tests could be repeated. And if you really don't think that he discovered life, why not just do the test again and say, look, see?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not life. And, so it's very strange. The
and we
whole
could get up there
strange.
Without humans, just
mm-hmm.
using robotics, we
mm-hmm.
could get up there a lot quicker. I mean, it's,
mm-hmm.
it wouldn't even take that long to send it up there, but just like you said, obviously you could stick it right to him
mm-hmm.
and say, okay, look, here's this whole craft, nothing but life detection.
Right.
Every kind of life detection we can come up with.
Mm-hmm.
And you send it up there, see what happens, right?
Right.
And that's not going to happen.
No.
It's to the point, like, we could have a 24-hour live cam. Now, there would be a delay.
Right.
But we could have a 24-hour live cam probably come from Mars with somewhat of a delay.
Right.
But there's got to be something like that we could, and have, have all the amateur astronomers, as they like to say, watching it all the time. A lot of things like that we could have. Mm-hmm. Why don't we?
I mean, I don't know.
What we do have is that space station camera that we do see nonstop craft. Mm-hmm. And people do watch that all the time, and when they find it, it always switches to another camera.
Mm-hmm. Or malfunctions.
We see stuff near the sun, and there again, they're always like, it was a glitch,
Yeah.
I mean, there was that one that looked like a freaking bird of prey Klingon vessel, and I don't know, man. It's just, we know, right? Because you've got everything that's come out with Tom DeLonge and all them. So we know that much. We've got it coming out saying, okay, well, there's these things we don't understand. And we've talked about that in depth, but that alone should make everybody go, well, if that's true, then everything else may be true. But, you know, the latest thing with To the Stars is scaring me because it seems that, you know, their materials they have, it seems like they may be going into business with the military to help them. You know, you have that story?
That's my next story.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm sorry. I didn't know if you would have that one or not. So that one got me so mad. I didn't really know how to take it.
Right.
So there you go, people. Let Stacy go.
Well, it's a good segue. Thank you very much.